Okay, Margot, we are a go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our ACRL Presents webcast as part of Open and with ACRL. And we're pleased to have Amy Buckland from the University of Chicago here today to present Celebrate Open Access Week, all 52 weeks of the year. As a reminder, today's session is being recorded, and we'll send out via email and also post on the website the recording shortly after today's event. Now I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Margot. Hi, everybody. Happy Open Access Week. I'm glad you could all take time out of your day to join for this. So today's session, what I'd like to do is I'd like everyone, if we could hold all the questions to the end. I've left a good amount of time. And I figure what we'll do is I'm going to go through a list of ideas and various things that you can do to keep open access. It's kind of like that keep Christmas with you all through the year idea. Keep open access as a concept going throughout the year, not just during this week. And I'm sure you guys are going to have some ideas also that you can share in the chat box at the end, and then we'll bring it up in discussion. And I'm kind of hoping that Margot will help me mediate it all, and we'll be able to get a whole bunch of ideas out there, not just what I've got. So without waiting any longer, let me jump in and talk to you about keeping open access as a concept going throughout the year. So I'm going to look specifically at ways to do it internally within the library, and I've kind of broken it down into a departmental view of things. I'm fully aware that departments have different names and different institutions, but you'll kind of get the idea of where I'm going with it. And then also looking externally outside the library, what are other things on campus, other departments on campus that you can partner with to talk about open access year-round. This way, this is all with the goal to not having open access be a thing that we only talk about once a year. It tends to be that way on many campuses, and I really think that now that open access is here and it's not going away, we need to just kind of integrate it into our discussions all the time. So there's always the usual suspects of how we can talk about open access. If you have an institutional repository, then you have a number of ways that you can introduce that concept into discussions with faculty and with students. Being able to make all the research happening at your institution available to the public in this manner is a great calling card for talking about open access. And it shouldn't just be your institutional repository manager or your ScholComm team that are talking about the institutional repository. You can always set up tools for your public services people to be able to talk about the repository, let's say, with grad students. So grad students, when they graduate, maybe they want to make their work available via open access so they could deposit it in the repository, that type of thing. So it shouldn't just be the people who are doing the dirty work talking about open access when it comes to the institutional repository. The same thing with all the scholarly communications outreach that your team might be doing, or the one person in your institution might be doing. That's always an easy entry into talking about open access, whether that's about author rights support, which I know a lot of us are doing in our institutions because there's such a need for it, and just generally raising awareness. These are the scholarly communications group and the repository people are usually the usual suspects, I call them, for talking about open access. But that puts a lot of pressure on a small group of people. So I'm going to look at different ways, different departments, and how they can also integrate open access concepts so that it's not just your ScholComm people who are talking about open access. So the first one I'd like to touch on is the folks who are doing collection development in whatever that looks at your institution. There's a number of different options out there to support open access in a way that is more internalized, in a way that perhaps your resources are divided such that you might have a little bit of money to support something, but you don't have a lot of people's time. So this is a great option for people, is supporting open access membership. So memberships, there are a number of associations out there that have thrive on a membership model. Now there's kind of two different pieces of those. There's the kind that the membership model gets the authors, if they were to publish in an open access journal, let's say, they would get a discount on any fees associated with that. So those are things like the Public Library of Science and Biomed Central, those type of things. So in those cases, the institution gets a membership, becomes members of those organizations, and then their authors are always notified that they can get a discount. Then there's other groups, for instance, the Open Library of the Humanities, where you can join, and it's actually supporting the publishing of various monographs and journals. So that's another way that you can kind of divert some of your collections fund into supporting what will be an open access collections fund. And then there's other models like PeerJ, where you're able to kind of deposit a sum of money with PeerJ, and then your authors can take advantage of that money. So there's a bunch of different options like this, and I'm a big fan of thinking about our collections budget in terms of all the collections, not just the collections that we are renting from other publishers, not just scoping it in a very traditional way. I always talk about, I think it would be really an interesting project if some major academic libraries were able to divert a certain percentage of their collections budget to purely supporting open access. So these memberships are one way where you can kind of get into that discussion. Another way that the collections folks can help with this type of stuff is actually figuring out a way to identify open access content in the catalog. Make it easier for the user to spot when something won't require a login, when a resource is publicly available. So this could be done in a number of ways. You could have a little tag on things. You could create a sub-collection. You could even integrate the nice open access unlocked lock that you'll see on the slide. You could even have a little visual representation of that type of stuff. I think being able to see immediately that something is open access both raises the discussion around open access, because if someone doesn't know what it is, then they'll have an opportunity to ask. And it also makes it clear to members of our public what they have access to without being affiliated with the institution. And I think more and more of us are thinking of our institutions as wanting to have a strong impact on the public. So being able to identify open access content for the public in a quick way would really help us show our impact. Finally, the last one is, your campus is likely creating a number of open access resources already, and if we can integrate them into the catalog, that actually gives them a certain level of authority, which is really important when it comes to open access, and it also hooks them up and networks them with all the other content. It basically, integrating them with the traditionally accessible content levels the playing field in a way. We've all heard a lot of myths about how open access content has no peer review, is of lesser quality. And by integrating them into our regular resources on a daily basis and giving them the authority of being cataloged, we actually remove a lot of those myths and say that we just care about access to information. So by doing this, we're saying it doesn't matter if it's full access or open access. Here it is, it's available through our catalog. It's also a great way to promote the content being created on your campus. So this could be anything from digital collections to, we all have those little research groups who have working papers that they might want to be, that they've thrown up on a website that we could give them better Google juice to. The number of events and symposia and video on campus that happens that is then just kind of living out on YouTube somewhere. If we could aggregate a lot of that content into our catalog and make it easier to find for our users, that's really important for us to do. And tied to this is a lot of open data that's out there. Cataloging open data, I know it's a hairy beast in and of itself, but making that data easier to find is definitely something that offers us an opportunity to talk about openness in scholarship on a regular basis. So those are some ideas I have for what the collections people can do when they to integrate open access into their regular days. Special and digital collections. My biggest one that I always talk about with people is to have a reuse statement on any sites with your digital content. It's amazing to me, and I've worked at a number of institutions now, the variety of rights and reuse statements used for digitized images, digitized books, all that stuff. Some of them don't even exist. Sometimes it's really hard to find them. So I would say if there's one thing you could do to really make the life a lot easier for our users is to have a very clear rights and reuse statement. So if it's in the public domain, state that. If you're licensing it with Creative Commons, state that clearly. I think there's so much content that is available digitally that is not, and available via open access, that is not being used because the rights are either really squishy around it, or you have to email to use any image whatsoever. And that's a barrier for a lot of people. So I think if we digitize these things to put them up there and have them used and to support open scholarship, I think having a very clear rights and reuse statement is a great first step. A number of special collections centers are hosting Wikipedia edit-a-thons, which I think is just a fantastic way to discuss open access and scholarship with students, because there's always that stigma, is slowly going away now, but that Wikipedia, how do you know what you're reading? How do you know the value, the authority, the quality of the content? And this is what librarians do. We love talking about the authority of a website and things like that, and teaching that to people. So editing Wikipedia in the special collections is a great way to do two things: both teach students how to properly evaluate a source, and to have your resources findable in Wikipedia. My favorite thing with digital collections is to go down and list them in that external resources questions on Wikipedia. Go list your special collections there. Bring some traffic to your site. Share your work. And you're going to have this great rights and reuse policy on everything. So it'll be really easy for people to integrate it into their open access publications, or to remix it if they want to use some of the artwork in another project. These edit-a-thons, they're fairly easy to run. The Wikipedia Library Project can definitely help you out on it. I know it's been quite successful at a number of libraries, and ultimately it makes Wikipedia, which has the possibility of being the best open access resource out there for links to scholarship and comprehensive information, it will make it better, because both it will have your content in it, and it will be vetted by students who are learning how to vet authoritative pages. So I highly recommend running one of those. And they're really fun to organize. Everyone who I know has done them has really enjoyed it. And it's great also to get your librarians in and learning how to edit Wikipedia and things like that. Building digitize on-demand services for public domain content is a great way to, it's basically user-driven publishing of your public domain content. So this is one way. We're all very interested in digitizing our special collections and making them available. And there's always the tricky moments of where do we start, how do we know what is important, that type of thing. So having your users be able to request that either through your catalog or through a web form is a great way to, A, meet a user's need, and then B, now you have a digital object that you can make available and make openly available to anyone who wants to read it. Again, you're going to have a great rights and reuse statement on anything, so it'll be very easy for people to know it, and you're going to have your cataloging folks take care of making it accessible. So here, all of these ways are ways to just integrate open access to our content into our day-to-day work, essentially. And I find the special collections, we all love what's in our special collections, and there's so much effort going around getting it out there and available that open access is another way to just look at the content and why we need to work to make it available. Digital services or library technology, whatever you want to call that unit, already probably does a number of things related to open scholarship and open access. They should be sharing their code. It's likely that they are sharing their code. I have the number of GitHub repositories available now where folks are sharing what they're building in libraries is very encouraging, and definitely the licenses that are being used are positive ones to getting folks out there using the content. One other thing that is really fantastic and that is starting, that has been going now for a number of years, but is really starting to start running, is library-based publishing, specifically of open access journals. So a number of societies and smaller journals are very eager to adopt an open access model, but they might be relying on their current publisher for the tech side of things. So they don't know how to install software on a server. They don't know that whole system side of things. And this is an area where libraries can really, really make a big impact in open access, because we know how to run software on the server side quite well. We know how to make sure that we pick tools that are sustainable and scalable and all of those things. So supporting library-based publishing is a rather strong yet uncomplicated way to really support open access. This could be anything from just hosting a software like the Public Knowledge Project's OJS to pushing forward into editorial support of the journal. You might have people on your staff who are familiar with publishing and are able to talk about the requirements of building an editorial board, the different types of peer review that are out there, those type of things. And so that's where you can decide on the level of service that you want to offer. But hosting something like the Open Journal Systems suite of products is not taxing for most library technology groups, because we've already done this with a variety of other software. And I have to put a promotional plug in for this great book, and I'm not just saying it's a great book because I had a chapter in it, but a great book came out this year from ACRL, Getting the Word Out, Academic Libraries as Scholarly Publishers, by Mike Furlow and Maria Bond were the editors. And I highly recommend you guys picking that up. It goes through everything from the metadata side to the student service side to copyright issues to data, all the different sides of library-based publishing, and how academic libraries can really create an impact in the scholarly publishing world. And a lot of the focus on it is, of course, on open access to these services. Public services, the face of the library is so important, and it's really, I always try and make sure that anyone who is the face of the library has a few quick talking points about open access, and work with them to figure out ways to integrate it into their daily life. And so one of the easiest ways is to encourage the use of Creative Commons licenses for all the teaching materials and all the promotional materials that public services librarians build daily, pretty much. Even just having something like the Creative Commons logo available on the slide deck just raises awareness around the concepts of open access and making this information available. Some students might not notice it, some faculty might not notice it, but some might, and some might say, some might ask at the end of the session, can I reuse your slides? And that's your moment to say, yeah, you can totally reuse my slides because I've actually licensed this with Creative Commons, so you can do whatever you want. Another way is all of those lovely subject guides and course guides and everything that we build regularly to meet the needs of our users. It's important that we also include open access content into those guides. I know the traditional publishing definitely has been around a lot longer, and sometimes it's easy to just list the big 5 databases for your field or the big 5 journals for your field. But it's important that we start raising awareness around open access with regards to these guides, especially because it does, again, give open access that authority and that value that is so important for it. So I'm not saying that everybody should go out and find one open access journal to put on their guide by any means, but be aware of what is being published in your field from non-traditional publishers and in non-traditional ways, and see if, of course, do your full librarianness on it and make sure that it's a quality publication and worth mentioning. But if it is, figure out ways to incorporate it into your subject guides and your course guides. the visibility will go very far to support open access and also make it less of a strange thing that we're talking about. Administration. Well, administration has a lot that they can do to support open access. And of course, one of the biggest ways is raising the issue on campus wherever the senior administration goes. Discussing it with the provost and others in senior admin just kind of brings it to the table in a number of ways that are really important. Decisions around things like open access mandates and policies are an institutional decision, and so there's always the need for someone to take a leadership role in that and to make sure that everybody fully understands the implications of everything. And I definitely think that senior admin in the library are the people who should be leading this. If possible, if you're at an institution with tenure for librarians, see if you can work even just the terminology open access into your tenure requirements. You'd be surprised at how far that will go in suddenly making open access a completely legitimate venue for publication. We've all heard that myth that I can't publish in an open access journal because whatever reason, no peer review, lower quality, all those myths, I won't get tenure. So encouraging scholars to publish in venues with the highest impact, regardless of whether it's tool access or open access, goes a long way to increasing the breadth of scholarship that's out there. Senior administration, I'm a big fan of getting their work deposited in the IR. Just having a place to point to is always handy, both for the institutional repository manager to say, even my dean's content is in here, to also just, starting to walk the talk in a way, and that if your dean is doing this work, then you should also be depositing. Looking externally on campus, the research office has a number of opportunities for us to partner with them and to work on ways of talking about open access on a regular basis with the community. So the new requirements that have come out in the OSTP mandates in the States and the tri-agency mandate in Canada, these are really great. I kind of think of them as like the thin edge of the wedge to getting in front of researchers all the time and talking about access to their work and access to their research output. The research office and many institutions will only be kind of aware of these things. They'll be aware of the NIH public access policy. They will be aware of OSTP, but they're probably not completely ready for it. So the library, as a way, we can partner with them and kind of, I look at it as helping them out. It's okay, we got you. We can help you with this. We know how to talk to researchers. We know what open access looks like. We have a repository for this content if the granting agency requires it. We can definitely help you with this stuff. It's an interesting moment. I think a lot of research offices are looking for help around these topics and might not necessarily think of the library. So this is kind of our time to present ourselves to them and say, hi guys, we're here. We would like to help you with this. One of the ways you can do that is some libraries have started offering workshops for faculties who are applying for grants. And we always want to get them before they apply, right, to talk about, well, your grant is going to require you to make your work openly available. And so you should maybe build in a budget line for the dissemination of your research in case you want to publish in a journal that has an author processing charge, something like that. And getting them in getting it in early also offers us a great opportunity to talk about research data management and how they need to think about what data they're going to use because they're going to have to make their data available, and how are they going to do that. Some libraries have had a lot of success meeting with the research office during their financial responsibilities chat with the researcher. So the researcher has gotten their grant. They know they've got to manage this money properly. They meet with the research office for a workshop on how to, best practices and how to stay compliant with everything. And they're giving the library a bit of time during that to talk about possible fees associated with work dissemination, and other ways that they can make sure that their work is openly available without having to pay that if that's something that they don't feel they can manage with their grant. So doing those in tandem also, if you can ever be in a discussion about the finances of a grant, the researchers will remember that this is something important that they really need to consider doing. Other workshops have been that libraries have run with the research office are everything from submitting those grant proposals through those awfully awful submission systems, those epic web forms that they have to go through. You can partner with them and work through what does it mean, what subjects should they be using, that type of stuff. And throughout all of this, you can just talk about the open access as the end result of it. Not necessarily as the be-all and end-all of their research by any means, but the more often that we just say open access with our communities, the less of a strange and weird thing it becomes. And so that's really how to move forward talking about open access with the research office. Events. I'm sure you guys have a number of events on your campus that you can think of how you could tie in discussions around open access. And I really hope when we get to questions soon that you'll type in some of your local events, because I think there's way more than what I've listed here. But these are just a few quick ones that I thought of. So Fair Use Week, which is coming up in February 2016. This will be the second one, I believe. It's a great way to just talk about the whole collection of rights to scholarship that are out there and to integrate discussions around open access. So anytime you're talking about fair use, you're going to talk about author rights, you're going to talk about the public domain, you're going to talk about how to license your own intellectual property, and so you can obviously tie in discussions around open access with that type of thing. People seem to be fair use is still a very tricky concept for a lot of people, so I think the discussions are necessarily longer and more in depth than they might be for other topics. So there's lots of opportunity there to tie fair use and what you can do with your scholarship to how do you want to license your own scholarship in the future so that folks don't have to worry about this type of thing. That's generally how I have had good success talking about Fair Use Week with researchers, is explaining to them that they can't use certain things in the classroom to teach because they don't meet the fair use criteria, and then explain to them that they should be sure when next time they publish to license their content in a way that supports open access and access to their research. Peer Review Week just happened, and I think likely there'll be another one next year. Talking about peer review and the scholarly publishing process obviously leads to lots of different roads for open access discussion. We all, whether you love it or hate it, peer review is definitely one of the ways that we measure scholarship. And there are a number of different models out there. And I don't think, not all researchers are necessarily aware that there's anything other than the double blind. So being able to bring up those discussions, have a debate about those things is always a way to then have a larger debate around scholarly publishing. I know a number of libraries hold an author appreciation day for their faculty. So it tends to be whoever published a book or a significant journal article or edited something. They have an appreciation day in the library where they invite all the authors to come and have coffee and donuts or whatever they have. Be sure to include open access authors within that. There likely are some on your campus. The Public Library of Science has great traction now, so I'm pretty sure you can find a few and bring them in. And so that everyone's talking about the publishing process and everyone's talking about being an author together. There's not one group who's talking about it only in terms of open access and one group who's only talking about the traditional publishing. These people all have the same profile as an author. They are all worthy of attention, and they should all know each other, and they should all be able to speak with each other. I think our separating them into separate events would be tricky, and I think it also decreases the amount of collaboration around the concept that if you have to publish, you should just publish so that you are read, and we'll figure that out. Convocation. I've had great success around convocation time offering workshops for graduating students who will be losing their affiliation to the institution and helping them find academic resources available to them in their future life. So, for instance, the School of Social Work, a lot of those students will go on to work in social work and not have access to the amount of databases and research that they have access through an institutional affiliation. So setting up a workshop where they will learn about the best free, openly available tools for their field is a great way to send them off into the world. It really helps them prepare and helps them understand that they won't have access to everything and how they'll need to go about vetting their own sources and making sure that the quality, the information that they are citing and using for their life is quality. So those workshops are a great addition for graduating students. Homecoming is a great time to showcase open access theses and dissertations. Returning students love to see their name beside the names of all the other alumni, especially while I was at McGill University. So we had Leonard Cohen and William Shatner and things like that. And so people wanted to be found in the same pool of authors, let's say. So homecoming is a great time to promote that type of thing. It's a great time if you've recently launched a repository and you need to talk to alumni because you didn't secure the rights when they graduated to make their work publicly available. You could set up a table during homecoming and invite alumni to sign waivers so that you can digitize their dissertation and make it publicly available. So homecoming is a pretty captive moment for everyone on campus. And I can't wait to hear you guys what your events are. So ultimately, we're going to get to questions very soon. Ultimately, I just want us to start thinking that and believing that open access is here. It's just here now, and so giving it just 1 week to talk about it on campus is not being our best. We can do better. We should just be integrating this into as many workflows as possible. We need to think of open access work the same as we think of any other work. There's some pretty terrible traditionally published work out there that we know of. So just not splitting between open access and traditional. We need to just accept it all and treat it all the same. And as librarians, this is really how we're going to walk the talk of access to information. This is kind of our moment to make sure that open access is not just something that we talk about 1 week a year and then lies dormant. We're going to integrate this into everything that we do because it already feeds into most of our daily work. Every time we catalog a resource, every time we digitize something, every time we create a website, every time we answer a question, we're facilitating access to information. And open access really just helps us do that so much more, that if we can integrate it into all of our workflows, it will make life that much easier. And that is all I have. Now I'd love to hear, I really want to hear from everybody on this call. And I think Margot is going to help me triage questions and things like that. So I'm looking for your questions, comments, cathartic confessions, things that worked, things that didn't work on your campus. Did I say something that is totally crazy? That type of thing. So I'll really open it up to all the attendees. Yeah, just type your questions or comments in the chat box. No questions, really? Well, oh, hang on one sec. I just see in the chat menu. Sorry, guys, just replying to someone. I feel like we need some really bizarre hold music or like that grocery store music for folks to listen to while I sort out this question. I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there are any questions and no comments. And I guess I should have been more controversial on that. Oh, here's one. Awesome. Oh, now they're all coming in. Rocking. Okay, let's see. What are my thoughts on library-supported author funds? I can see their use. This is just personally my opinion. I definitely see their use, and I see them solely as a stopgap measure for the moment. I don't think they encourage, I don't think it encourages the way that we want to fund journal publishing, really, to make it truly sustainable. But I do see it as a way to initiate discussions and provide people the opportunity to make their work openly available. I would much rather see institutions switch to a more membership or subscription-based service where instead of just the one-off for like one article in each journal. But I know a number of libraries have had great success with them. We will be at a tipping point, however, where we won't have enough money to do that and subscribe to the traditional journals. So we'll have to figure out what that breaking point is and then make very tough decisions. But I do think they are a stopgap measure that meet a need in the short term. Could suggest just one event to host during OA week. What would it be? An event to host during OA week would be, I'm a big fan of like a good debate. Get people from various publishers, get people from get authors who are pro open access and some that are anti-open access, and really figure out, is it just the myths that the anti-open access person is believing or what? Like really have a good scholarly debate on the topic. I think it really engages the audience. I think it makes people think of open access at a deeper level and all the different areas of scholarly life that it affects. And they tend to, we all have people on our campus who make good debaters either because they're a little bit out there or because they're very strong or because they're funny. So during open access, I think that's a great event. And I also think you should host something not during open access week related to it. So maybe think of having 2 debates, one during open access week and another one in March to keep people engaged with everything. Just going through. Sorry, just catching up. What do I think about alternative or open access textbooks? I think they are the way textbooks are going to go. I think that students want open textbooks. I think a lot of textbook authors would like to be able to not ever worry about a print format, firstly, be able to integrate more digital content into their textbooks. And I think that the concept of the textbook as being having to be nimble and responsive to the course is something that is really starting to grow more and more. And so the library is well positioned to help authors research and work with groups to publish their work. We can also host software, like Pressbooks is a great tool that you could use to host open access textbooks that are written by your faculty. But I do think that the traditional concept of the textbook in many fields, and even the traditional concept of the course pack, is changing radically, and libraries we're really in a good spot to both know about the different resources available in these subjects and to figure out ways to both make that work available and to bundle it up for people. I mean, we've done electronic courseware for course packs, for quite a while. We could even make that larger and just say, like, we're going to, if the rise of MOOCs has made us had to think about how we're going to support things in new and open ways. So I definitely think open access textbooks are here, and there's a lot of research being done on it right now. And I know there's a big conference in Vancouver in November around open textbooks. So there's lots being done. There's some very exciting initiatives. Just following up on the open access funds in the chat. Yeah, there's definitely, the transitions are tough. Any other questions? I'm going to wait about another minute and see, because last time I got a lot of questions all at once. Oh, here's one. I mentioned PLOS and Open Library of the Humanities. Any news or media sites regularly featuring OA resources? I mean, a number of news and media sites linked to Wikipedia, for sure. I do think this is a great moment for libraries to work with our communications and PR departments to have our open resources discussed more and to be made more public awareness around them. I mean, Public Library of Science gets some pretty good citations, as do Biomed Central articles and everything. So there are definitely options, but I think that is something that we don't do quite as well. Making sure that the news knows about these open access resources. They tend to always jump to the big traditional resources. So I think that's something that we could actively do. Maybe that's a role for associations to play in also. I know big research universities, we do have a database of our experts that frequently gets consulted. Maybe we should be creating databases of our, scholarly content for specifically aimed at the news and media world. There's lots of opportunity there. I can think of a few things. So that's a really great question. Thank you for asking. I got a question about attendance at events, at open access events. Yeah, so small, sometimes huge. It really depends, I've found, on timing. Open Access Week is the third week of October or fourth week of October, which in some institutions is midterms. So then, finding a room, getting students to do anything but study, that type of thing is really, really hard to do. For a while, I was hosting Open Access Week as Open Access Month in February, which was a time when more students were around and they had more time to engage with the discussion. It's there's always those things. If you can have a slightly controversial topic for a discussion, you'll get a lot of people. If you give away t-shirts or candy, you'll get people. But it definitely can seem a little slow going at first. A lot of that comes from getting buy-in from on high. So, you know, if the provost's office mentions your event, that might get you a few more visitors than if it's just on the library events page. So a lot of it has to do with promotion, and a lot of it has to do with raising awareness on campus in the early years. If you're in your early years of talking about open access on your campus, it's tricky. You kind of have to develop an elevator pitch for a variety of different subjects, a variety of different audiences, so that you can sell it to them. That's why groups like SPARC and the Right to Research Coalition are really great, because they have these communities of people that you can bounce ideas off of and steal other people's ideas and see what works. So I would encourage all of you to kind of reach out and talk to each other about this type of thing and see what has worked. Another question. What would I advise libraries to do, say, about predatory publishers? We were asked for a workshop on this. So predatory publishers are definitely a huge topic these days. And I always like to talk about them in terms of how we talk about any information resource. We should be vetting everywhere and anywhere that we read. Just because something is published by a large traditional publisher does not necessarily mean that the quality is 100% perfect. So predatory publishers, I always encourage faculty and students who ask me about them, look at the editorial board, look at the past articles. What do they look like? How long have they been around? Do you see yourself in that journal? Do you see your community in that journal? I'm less concerned about where it's published or what the website looks like. Obviously, if it has typos, you probably wouldn't trust their editing capabilities. But I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned at have a read of a few articles and really see what the content is. And are people in your community talking about that article? And are there people on the editorial board that you know and that you trust for their scholarship? I really think if we focus on looking at publishers, every single publisher in a similar way, and not focus so much on predatory, because predatory, a lot of the myths are predatory or all open access, and they're just in it for the money. Meanwhile, there's plenty of predatory practices in traditional publishing right now, so we have to really just teach our communities how to really determine where their content deserves to go. They are providing these places with the content. We should teach them how to vet where they want to be affiliated. So that's really, so workshops around that, I really look more at the publishing system as a whole. Definitely talk about the predatory nature of some publishers for sure, but I try not to use that term as much either. I just find it's very complicated, and what you think is predatory, I might not think is predatory, and vice versa. And you frame a workshop around authors' rights. Yeah, and incorporating authors' rights into that is it's really the same thing. It's a lot of, I want to be sure that as an author, I want to be my best self in the scholarly land. And so by doing that, I want to make sure I publish in reputable venues, and I want to make sure that I retain the rights that I need to do what I want with my intellectual property. All right, we have 12 minutes. Do I have any suggestions on best practices for outreach to faculty? Yeah, so I have run a series of workshops about basically looking at elevator pitches, and not them for real, but as a concept, and looking at the different stakeholders on campus and what's driving them as a person on this campus. What are their needs on this campus, and how can I tie in open access to support what they need? So with faculty, that can be something like, I mean, all the studies are coming out now that the citation rates of open access work are much higher. So even just something as simple as that, if you're on tenure track, having higher citation counts, anytime you have bigger numbers, that's always a good sign. Some faculty, I definitely use the flattering their ego side of it and saying, but don't you want me to preserve and showcase your intellectual output forever and ever and ever? And that has definitely worked quite well. Right now, I think these public access mandates that we have from OSTP and the Tri-Agency are a great way to get in front of them and talk to them about both open access and research data management. And a lot of people, if you're dealing with open access on your campus, chances are good you're also dealing with the research data management questions. So I really think that kind of using the movement of granting agencies towards making work publicly available as really the best way to get in front of them and to be invited to talk about things. Like, just tell faculty councils you can come and talk about these things, and don't worry, the library is totally up to speed on this and we can help you with it. But so that's what I mean for best practices in terms of there's best practices, and then you have to fine-tune them to your campus. And one researcher might not care that you want to preserve his work, he just wants citation counts and vice versa. But definitely answering the questions, thinking of the stakeholder and not just what we want to say about open access is an important tactic. Talking about how eventually open access might save the library money, that's a very big might. Some people won't care about that because they're just going to think that's the library's job to manage that. But they will care about making sure that, when they get their Nobel Prize, that all of their work is publicly available. So those would be my tips. I know the ACRL Scholarly Communication Toolkit has a number of best practices in it, so you might have a look at that to find some people have shared also what has worked for them. Any sites that I would recommend following for open access news, blogs that you prefer? Well, I definitely, ACRL's, I should note, I am the vice chair for the Research and Scholarly Environment Committee for ACRL, so we manage a lot of the scholarly communication tools that are built, but I do think our toolkit is pretty solid, and our listserv, which can be very chatty sometimes, still has a great discussion area for people. As for blogs, I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith, who is at Duke University. His blog, he really touches, he has a law degree, so he's able to actually comment on a lot of the legal issues that surround open access with copyright and with publishing contracts and that side of things. So I'm a huge fan of his. I'm a huge fan of Gavia Lib, who talks about open access, repositories, and really kind of is able to address what's happening nitty-gritty in the library and the real-world side of open access. Those are probably my go-tos for sure, along with the ACRL Scholarly Com Toolkit and ScholCom-L, which I usually have to read on my lunch hour because sometimes it just explodes. We have about 7 minutes. I'm just going to wait. I see someone typing. Any other questions? Could save you. We could end a little bit early and you could all have a 5-minute break before the next inevitable meeting I'm sure you all have. Okay, well, I think I will call it then. Please feel free to email me to follow up if something was up and you're just getting to a question right now. And I encourage you all to keep talking about this on your campus and host events related to open access year-round, so that by the time Open Access Week rolls around, it's really just a day where everybody can wear orange buttons and smile at each other, as opposed to the day where everybody has to initiate discussions again for the year. So thanks, everybody.